Ncuti Gatwa's era of Doctor Who has well and truly started, with a double helping of a season opener that featured snot monsters, a spaceship powered by shitty nappies, and some bootleg Beatles. Basically, it was a double bill of what if Doctor Who did Alien, but it had incredibly cute babies in it, and what if Doctor Who went to the swinging 60s and nobody was swinging. But did it actually deliver? Well, let's take a look. Doctor Who is back, and this time we're on season 1. Again, for some reason. Thankfully, we're very much still in the same continuation, as there were lots of references to events that had happened before. The Rani got mentioned, as did the events surrounding the Doctor being adopted by the Time Lords as a child, so at least we're addressing that particular elephant in the room rather than ignoring it. The events of 1963's Unearthly Child was heavily mentioned in particular, and although it might be hard to imagine someone like, let's say, William Hartnell telling his travelling companions that most of the universe is knackered babes, we do get to tread upon some familiar ground. The Doctor is the last of his race, Gallifrey is no more, and a companion gets to make a time-travelling mobile phone call back to their mum after the Doctor's had a quick fiddle with his sonic screwdriver. But the big challenge that the BBC, and now by extension Disney, are facing is trying to keep the existing fan base on board without alienating them too much, whilst also attempting to appeal to a whole new family audience in this era of streaming services. And I don't really feel that they've got that balance right just yet. Fans who are concerned about the show being Disney-fied, being made to pander to its new American audience, or rather its Disney audience, would not have been reassured by the sight of talking babies and a song and dance number featuring cameos from Strictly Come Dancing stars. But let's dive into each episode anyway and go through what was good and bad about both. Like a lot of Doctor Who episodes, this had a message to tell, and references to adoption, immigration, and asylum seekers were plastered all over the opening episode, Space Babies, alongside the monster made of snot and a spaceship powered by the collective methane of a bunch of space nappies, which call to mind the burping and farting Slovene of the 2005 revival. Whilst the talking babies may have been funny, it will have been hard for real-life parents not to have felt their heartstrings being tugged watching the space babies' anguish at being abandoned, especially at the moment when little Eric tells Ruby that he's never been given a hug. I mean, come on. Aww. Although the script really missed a trick by not having all the babies repeating over and over to Ruby, "Are you my mummy?" Ooh. The Bogeyman was an effective enough monster of the week, and there was just a little moment where you thought, surely they're not growing babies in jars just to feed to this thing, or surely they're not going to start killing these babies off. It was certainly a scary moment when Space Baby Eric decided that he was going to be brave and go off to fight the monster with his little wooden sword. But then the babies came to the rescue because they've got freaking flamethrowers attached to their pushchairs. Yes, babies with freaking flamethrowers. It sounds like that should be a video that Tom Scar would have put out on YouTube.
That's a baby with a gun. Baby! With a gun! I'm calling the police. They hung up.
The Space Babies. I mean, you can see where that Disney money is being spent, but it's almost like Doctor Who looks a little too good now. It looks a little too polished. And with that need to appeal to the American market, it feels that there's too much pandering to it. Red Dwarf went through a similar thing when they ditched the models and the puppets for CGI, and it had its opening season story set around the JFK assassination. And it's not a season that's always particularly looked upon with fondness. You hope the same thing's not going to happen here. And despite the Disney money being spent, are you telling me that that's the best you could do for the talking babies' mouths? It looks terrible. It looks as bad as the time that Warner Brothers tried to paint out Henry Cavill's mustache when they were doing reshoots for Justice League. It's very distracting and very strange looking at times. The design of the spaceship though, with the kids using toys and bits of string to work the ship, was absolutely brilliant. And the nanny filter, where certain naughty words were changed to something more kiddie-friendly, made for some brilliantly funny moments.
I told you these systems are a crock of waste products.
Mind your language, Nanny.
By the way, Doctor Who acknowledged that the Whoniverse and the Star Trek universe are the same. So those comic book crossovers are indeed canon, folks. Even the former crew members of the spaceship were wearing Star Trek-esque uniforms. Same colour scheme too. Regarding the end of the episode, where the Doctor attempts to fling the bogeyman out through the airlock into space, but then changes his mind. Now, I like that we're going back to the idea that the Doctor doesn't kill, that the Doctor would not want to take another life, but on the other hand, the turnabout in sentiment towards the monster was something that wasn't earned. We had no time spent with this monster to determine whether or not it was an evil, mindless creature or it was a sentient being that was just lashing out because it was frightened or scared. There was no emotional connection with the creature. There was no interaction with the bogeyman at all. And now all of a sudden, it's all fine and harmless? I mean, even the space babies looked upset at the prospect of the creature being sucked into space. But hang on a minute, you were taking a bloody flamethrower to this monster less than 10 minutes ago. Anyway, of course, the Doctor saves the day, everyone lives happily ever after, Ruby gets her very own TARDIS key, and the pair of them head back to Ruby's flat, where they crash into the kitchen. And it looks like this Doctor is going to be in danger of getting a slap across the face from a companion's mum again. And it was established that the one place the Doctor can never take Ruby Sunday is back to the moment where she was left at the church on Ruby Road. Perhaps the Doctor wants to avoid a repeat of what happened when he took Rose Tyler back in time to the day her father died, and time was changed in a catastrophic way. But I feel that in this case, we are going to be going back to Ruby Road before long. Those flashbacks of the mysterious woman have pretty much determined that yes, this is going to happen. So yes, there is more mystery surrounding who Ruby Sunday is as the episode comes to an end, with the Doctor secretly making scans of her DNA like he did with Amy back during the 11th Doctor's era. But what does it all mean? What's going on? I'm liking the mystery here. It was a great feel-good episode, but there were also far too many plot holes in the story. Far too many moments where I went, well, hang on a minute, why did that happen? That seemed to happen an awful lot during Chris Chibnall's time as the writer and showrunner on Doctor Who. You don't really expect the same thing to happen with Russell T Davies. This didn't even feel like an opening episode to a season either. This felt like it should have been one of the episodes that you get midway through the season. I don't know how it was decided which episode should have been the opener, but this was not the one to start things off with. Still, let's go on to the next episode, The Devil's Chord. So Ruby wants to go back to 1963 and watch the Beatles record their first ever album. And why not indeed? Even the Doctor seems surprised that he's never thought about doing that before. It certainly won't be the first time that the Beatles were featured on the show. They actually appeared as themselves in the William Hartnell story, The Chase, using a clip from Top of the Pops. Sadly, we were cruelly denied a glimpse into the TARDIS wardrobe as Millie and Shooty got ready for the 60s. And sadly, the disappointments just kept coming. Needless to say, if my dad had decided to watch this episode because it was Doctor Who meeting the Beatles, he wouldn't have been best pleased. The internet had tremendous fun laughing at the not exactly convincing casting of the Fab Four for The Devil's Chord. Presumably the decision had also been made that John Lennon, abbreviated commas, should wear his later trademark circular specs to be more recognisable. And not only were the Beatles, hyphenated commas, and Cilla Black, hyphenated commas, less than convincing in appearance, there was also not a single note of recognisable music being played from any of them. Russell T Davies said that none of their music could be used in the episode for rights and costs reasons. The chord that John and Paul play at the end of the episode that saves the day was hinted that it could have been the long debated opening chord of A Hard Day's Night, or the drawn out crashing chord ending of A Day in the Life, but appeared to actually be neither. Which raises the question of why bother to use the Beatles at all if they couldn't use their music or their likeness. Again, let's go back to that Disney money being used. They've got the Beatles documentaries on Disney Plus. Are you telling me that they've paid for that, but then that couldn't also extend to having the rights to the music as well? You've either got the Disney money or you haven't. Use it. Whilst we're on the subject of Disney money, was this the best special effect that they could have come up with for the musical notes? They really don't look like they're part of the scene at all. Ironically enough, it does look like something that's Disney. It looks like something out of a cartoon. It doesn't look realistic. And seeing as the junkyard and Susan was mentioned, could we not have had a scene where the Doctor actually sees or perhaps meets Susan Foreman while she's on her way to school? You know, get Carol Ann Ford back in for a quick scene, de-age her with CGI or get a body double. That would have been a nice throwback, especially considering the year that they're in, 1963. Again, come on, if Disney's chucking you a boatload of cash, bloody use it. Luckily, the episode does have a saving grace, and it is Jinx Monsoon as the Maestro, a genuinely fun, scenery-chewing villain that 1980s Doctor Who producer John Nathan Turner would have absolutely adored to have had in an episode. Monsoon is fantastic, clearly enjoying themselves as they deliver a performance with more ham than the deli counter from Morrison's. And I really, really hope that we see this character return again. The Maestro stealing all of the music in the world and then the world going to absolute shit as a result was very well done. You can see the feeling that there's some hope returning to the world when Ruby starts playing the piano on the roof. Our world would simply not be the same without music in it, and for the Maestro to take all of that away from us is something that really strikes a chord. No pun intended. During the episode, the Doctor referred to his battle with the Toy Maker and how it tore his soul in two, which signified that the bi-generation was a one-off and we're not going to be seeing it again anytime soon. And the encounter with the Toy Maker may have allowed for a number of other powerful higher beings to leak into the universe as well. Indeed, the Maestro is actually the child of the Toy Maker and looked to be just as dangerous as dear old Dad. And it seems like there's more to come, as it was clearly signposted again that the one who waits will reveal themselves before the end of the season. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd put money on that being Omega, making his long-awaited return to the series, or possibly Sutekh the Destroyer. But we'll have to wait and see.
There's always a twist at the end.
And then we had the final musical number. Now, to be honest, I was expecting the entire episode to be a musical number, like we saw with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like we saw with Lucifer, and more recently with Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, they didn't do that, but what they did do was something that went on for slightly too long. It got to a point where you were thinking, yes, okay, thank you, we get it, you can probably stop now. And they just carried on going. Less would have been more in this case. Also, if you're using the beat, you could have used the Beatles song. Never mind that there's always a twist in the end, you could have used Twist and Shout, which was the last song on the Beatles' debut album. But again, not allowed to use the Beatles music. Overall, this was another enjoyable episode. Maestro was a great villain and I hope that we'll see them again. The concept of what the world would look like without music was something that a lot of people could relate with. It was a stronger episode than Space Babies, but I was left disappointed with a lot of elements in it. The actors playing the Beatles and Cilla Black looked nothing like them. There was no Beatles music being used at all. Susan was referred to, but then not really followed up on. There was so much more that could have been done with this episode. One thing I cannot be disappointed with though is the dream team of Gatwa and Gibson. They have a wonderfully infectious chemistry as a pairing and I look forward to seeing more of them together. Oh, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the Susan Twist cameos in both stories hint towards something bigger happening by the end of the series. Just like with Bad Wolf, just like with Torchwood. I'm intrigued to see what happens next. After the first 2 episodes of the new season of Doctor Who, which seemed determined to greet any potential new Disney viewers with everything that could be fun, camp and just plain ridiculous about the show, all of a sudden, the 3rd episode comes along and it takes a much, much darker tone. It can only mean one thing: Stephen Moffat is back, baby! For this 3rd installment of what is the new Season 1, we have an alien planet, murderous AI, and the Doctor trying to stop a war while standing motionless in one spot for the entire episode. So, let's take a look. With the Doctor stuck in one place, this really becomes a strong episode for new companion Ruby Sunday to try and get him out of this fix. Although you would have thought that the Doctor would have learned his lesson the last time he stood on a landmine. Yes, he has done this before, believe it or not.
We're in the middle of a minefield. Follow me and tread in my footsteps.
12 seconds later.
Harry, I'm standing on a landmine.
With Gatwa largely immobile, Millie Gibson's Ruby Sunday stepped up as the Doctor's eyes and ears, giving us a chance to see her take some serious risks. It's definitely Gibson's strongest performance so far. It's a great building of the relationship between the Doctor and his new companion. She isn't going to blindly obey his orders. She's going to do what she thinks is right, even if that means putting herself in danger. This episode is full of fantastic lines, but perhaps Ruby gets the best line of the entire episode, as she responds to the Doctor saying, "Ruby, I forbid this," with a character defining, "Yeah, good luck with that." And our new Doctor showed off his emotional side, serenading us with a haunting soldier's song instead of trying to sarcasm his way out of this pickle, like perhaps Peter Capaldi's or John Pertwee's or Christopher Eccleston's version of the Doctor would have tried to do. It did also feel like a lot of the classic episodes that were filmed in an old quarry somewhere in Wales. It was definitely a change in tone, one that I think might very well surprise the new American audience. I mean, come on, in episode 1 we had goofy talking babies and snot monsters in space. In episode 2 we had the Beatles, a super camp villain, and plenty of singing and dancing. In episode 3, the Doctor steps on a landmine and Ruby gets fucking shot, whilst the message of thoughts and prayers keeps dotted about as if that's somehow comforting.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
The reoccurring theme of orphans reared its head again, with Splice, Ruby and the Doctor all having that same thing in common by the end. Episodes that rely on a child actor can fall or stand on that performance, and unfortunately there was a moment where I thought that Splice was actually supposed to be another robotic AI program, one that had been created by her father. She did seem to be completely oblivious to the fact that there was a landmine nearby and her dad was now dead and now a holographic image. And Splice seemed to be far too old to be distracted by photographs of holidays that she and her dad have been on. It's not a knock on the actress, absolutely not, but I do feel that perhaps a younger person should have played this part. If you're going to write the part like this, maybe a younger person should have played it. Oh, and how irresponsible were these soldiers anyway? How was it that she was able to just go wandering out into the battlefield without being stopped or without any sort of adult supervision? I mean, come on. Throughout the story, Moffat is pulling out elements from his previous scripts. For example, the villain guard were first mentioned in his very first stories for Doctor Who, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dancers. Indeed, the way that Splice kept asking, "Where is my daddy?" was spookily reminiscent of the Empty Child saying over and over again, "Are you my mummy?" The militarized clerics are a returning faction from the Time of Angels and the Time of the Doctor, and Moffat bringing them back for this story was a brilliant idea, as it allowed for the Doctor to make a point about the blind faith we put in technology, and the peculiar moments when we suddenly decide that we need proof rather than belief. This was also a message on the stupidity of war and the profitability of it, because there's always someone out there that's making money out of all this senseless fighting. The villain guard had ensured that as long as the war kept going, the more that the spending would continue. As it turns out, there is no opposing side in this war. There is no sinister species hiding in the mud or in the fog, and the Marines have spent all this time fighting against their own tech, fighting against an algorithm. Indeed, the ongoing message of thoughts and prayers whenever someone dies in this pointless war really hits hard. As in the United States, recent victims of gun violence have also been offered thoughts and prayers by seemingly sympathetic politicians who then refuse to do anything to legislate gun ownership or enact safety measures to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. But all these messages felt natural to the story. They were embedded into the storytelling without them being too blatant, too obvious, or even too patronising, which has been a criticism of recent Doctor Who stories. Amongst the fog of war, there is a blooming love story going on, and the will they, won't they romance between Monday and Canterbury kept the plot moving along nicely. And it was a genuinely upsetting moment when it soon dawned upon us that this romance was a doomed one. And hang on, sorry, was that Varadu Seifu as Monday, as in next season's already confirmed companion, Varadu Seifu? Again, there's always a twist in the end. Speaking of a twist, the real star of the piece was the AI villain itself, a terrifying extrapolation of current tech that decides whether you economically deserve to live. Tales of killer robots have been done before on Doctor Who, of course. For example, the Cybermen are literally a political take on the fear of technology replacing people and society. But here, they are some truly creepy philosophical undertones. And it's yet another appearance for Susan Twist, this time as the interface of the AI ambulance. She has now appeared as 5 seemingly completely different characters across 6 episodes. Mrs. Merridew in Wild Blue Yonder, the Heckler in The Church on Ruby Road, the Communications Officer in Space Babies, the Tea Lady in The Devil's Chord, and now the AI ambulance in Boom. Surely the Doctor is going to start noticing something soon. Is this leading somewhere, or are the production team just having fun with us? I really hope it's leading to something. By the way, I am aware that I haven't reviewed last year's Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, or the trilogy of 60th anniversary specials that brought back David Tennant and Catherine Tate and introduced Ncuti Gatwa to the series. Now, my review of Space Babies and The Devil's Chord seemed to be quite popular, hence the reason why I am covering Boom as well. But would you like me to go back and review these previous episodes as well? Let me know in the comment section below. In the end, it was a father's love for his child that trumped the AI's cold calculations in a resolution more deftly managed than Moffat's previous stab at a similar theme with James Corden. And this episode also has the benefit and bonus of not having James Corden in it. And the Doctor even got to name drop his own parental experiences, continuing this season's trail of long-lost relative breadcrumbs. Again, are we going to see Susan Foreman at some point? All in all, a taunt, unnerving episode that somehow still found time for those little heartwarming moments. It felt like a good healthy mix between classic Who and new Who, and is easily the best episode of this series yet. Probably one of the best episodes in a long time. Leave it to Moffat to make standing still for 40 minutes an exercise in nail-biting suspense. Oh, where was this energy during the Jodie Whittaker era? Why couldn't we have had Stephen Moffat write at least one story for Jodie Whittaker? Hopefully, Moffat will be sticking around more often. I hear that he's going to be doing this year's Christmas special, so fingers crossed for that. And it does look to be setting things up for Monday crossing paths with the Doctor again, as he promises that he will soon come back to visit Splice and Monday, this time for some fish fingers and custard, one of the dishes a post-regeneration Matt Smith demanded from a young Amy Pond in the 11th hour. Delicious I'm sure. In conclusion, again, this is the best episode of the season so far. If the double bill opener put you off from watching this season of Doctor Who, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you, then do come back and watch this. Give the series another go. I really, really hope that the increase of quality in these episodes continues. Ooh, last week's Doctor Who episode was a wild ride. Millie Gibson absolutely stole the show as Ruby Sunday, living her entire life haunted by spooky supernatural shenanigans. And get this, the Doctor was nowhere to be seen. Can you believe it? It's an episode of Doctor Who that looks set to be a spooky classic. Until we got to the confusing last act anyway. So, let's take a look. After the suspense of last week's boom, the new Doctor Who season continues to deliver the horror in 73 yards, with an episode destined to be remembered as one of the all-time great companion performances. The Doctor and Ruby find themselves in Wales, but no sooner have they arrived than the Doctor mysteriously vanishes. And no, he hasn't gone for a quick wee behind the back of the TARDIS. It is now left up to Ruby Sunday to unravel this mystery, which then ends up stretching throughout the whole of her life, morphing from creeping dread in rural Wales to a political thriller set between London and Cardiff. The highlight of the episode was, without doubt, that oppressive pub scene in Wales. One moment everyone was laughing at the gullible English tourist, and the next there was this seriously unnerving undercurrent about Mad Jack stalking the night. Brilliantly atmospheric. To be honest, I thought that the entire episode was going to be set inside this pub. I thought that this was going to be a classic Welsh folk horror story that featured a siege where people barricaded themselves in against the threat of an ancient menace. I was certainly getting some American Werewolf in London vibes here, as in, don't go out on the moors. Although, as a Yorkshireman, I think the part that scared me the most in this scene was the cost of a Coke. £5 for a bloody Coke? You're having a laugh there, mates. So it was surprising to see the action then shift back to London and then to Cardiff, and the haunting presence that stalked Ruby in Wales actually continues to follow her wherever she goes. Michelle Greenidge as Ruby's mum, Carla, was a delight, dismissively saying that it was only Welsh people that were scared of the mysterious woman, and going on about how men like to potter in their sheds. I can't say anything to that. I am literally sat in my pub shed that I built during lockdown as I'm narrating this. So yes, I can confirm men do like to potter about in their sheds. But her delivery to a locked out Ruby of "even your real mother didn't want you" was conveyed with cold conviction, and abandoned or orphaned children remained a persistent theme of this run of Ncuti Gatwa episodes. At one point, Kate Lethbridge-Stewart and Unit get involved to help out Ruby, and in a neat little bit of world building, it is revealed that these long-time allies of the Doctor have begun to notice some of the more stranger, more superstitious and supernatural elements that have started to creep into the world. So as well as the usual psychic training and telepathic dampeners, Unit personnel have also begun to wear necklaces of silver and salt as well. However, even all these measures couldn't help Ruby, and she was once again left abandoned by those who previously would have helped her. As the years tick by, Ruby spends more time becoming isolated, with her only constant companion being this mysterious follower who always manages to keep a distance of, yes, you've guessed it, 73 yards. We actually see Ruby getting older, although by older I mean that she ends up having slightly longer hair and begins wearing a pair of glasses. There's clearly been a fantastic breakthrough in the skincare industry because she still looks like she did in her 20s. I mean, wow. But then Ruby sees the opportunity where she may be able to use this distant figure for something good, as she remembers something that the Doctor told her before he disappeared, about a dangerous Prime Minister in the near future with nuclear war on his mind. All of this was absolutely brilliant, as Ruby showed that she never gave up and was actually able to prevent a disaster from happening. But then we got to the ending, and the identity of the mystery person was revealed to be none other than Ruby herself. There didn't seem to be any logic or explanation of how the older Ruby had been able to appear that way to herself for decades, or spring back in time at the crucial moment to prevent the timeline being created, beyond some vague hand-waving at, ooh, the supernatural. And what on earth was future Ruby saying to Carla and Kate that made them turn on Ruby like that? Sometimes the person that tried to speak to future Ruby would end up running away absolutely terrified, but Ruby's mother and Lethbridge-Stewart reacted with instant disgust and rejection. What on earth did she say to them? The overall point seems clear. Ruby needed to be kept alone so that she could focus on saving the universe. But there was no connection whatsoever between the explanation of future Ruby's true nature and the specifics of what she's doing and why she's doing this. This just ended up muddying the waters, which is a real shame as it was shaping up to be an absolute classic episode until it was revealed that it was older Ruby all along, and the final act just faltered from there. The events of 73 Yards will need to be explained at some point later on during the series. We can't just have this waved off as, oh, it was something supernatural. We need a proper explanation about how this happened, how future Ruby was able to do what she did, and why she did it in the way that, well, she did. However, despite not having all the answers yet, this was still a gripping tale about fear, mortality, resilience, and mostly hope. It was about hope, which is something that stems back to that very first Doctor Who serial.
Fear is with all of us and always will be, just like that other sensation that lives with it.
What's that?
Hope. Hope, Miss Wright.
This was a Dr. Light episode, a format introduced in 2006 to lessen the production schedule for the main cast, which over the years has led to some mixed results. For example, Love and Monsters is widely regarded as a mostly unpopular episode, despite having the brilliant stand-up comedian Peter Kay in it as the main villain. Although this idea would be utilised better a year later with two episodes, Blink and The Last of the Time Lords. In Blink, the Doctor and Martha Jones were kept mostly out of the picture throughout the story, only really turning up near the end of the episode. And in The Last of the Time Lords, Martha spent an entire year separated from the Doctor and navigating over a world ruled over by the Master, surviving God knows what and actually being able to still save the world. The same kind of storyline also occurred in 2008, with Donna Noble becoming the focus of Turn Left, a tale where Donna lives through an alternative timeline without the Doctor and ends up saving the day to reset events, although she ends up sacrificing herself in the process. That's kind of like this story really. Now, in the real world, the Doctor had to be absent from a good portion of this episode because Ncuti Gatwa had a scheduling clash with the final series of Sex Education, which was being filmed during the same time as the first block of this new Doctor Who series, December 2022 to January 2023. As a result of this, Ncuti Gatwa is in this episode for 2 minutes only. Yes, that's right folks, an entire 2 whole minutes. Count them both. So therefore Millie Gibson had to take up the reins in Gatwa's absence, and 73 Yards was actually the first ever episode she filmed, which makes her performance in this story even more impressive. This is even better than her performance in Boom last week, which was, again, fantastic, but here she gets to show off a full range in acting. It's a full-on acting masterclass. Ruby goes through, well, she goes through an emotional roller coaster throughout this episode. She ends up being terrified, heartbroken, vulnerable, angry, desperate, resolute, and finally triumphant. And she is utterly believable throughout it all. The seemingly now obligatory appearance by Susan Twist as the Hiker, her 6th distinctive character in the last 7 episodes, did finally spark some recognition as Ruby seemed to recognise her. But since we're in an alternative timeline, who knows if Ruby will remember her face the next time she crops up. Mrs. Flood also popped up as well in this episode, just to remind everyone that there's actually 2 mystery old ladies throughout this series. That's a lot of storyline balls getting juggled at this point, and it's really keeping the suspense going over what's going to happen next. In the aftermath of last week's Fairy Circle escapade, the Doctor and Ruby Sunday find themselves as virtual visitors on the moon of Fine Time, a utopia for the privileged white elite's offspring. However, this idyllic bubble is primed to burst in catastrophic fashion, and the moon's inhabitants really need to put down their personal devices and reach out for some industrial strength slug repellent if they want to avoid becoming lunch for something large and slimy. But can they? Let's take a look. of Fine Time, its residents exist in a perpetual state of vapid social media engrossment, live streams, and mindlessly following the whims of an all-controlling AI overseer. We're introduced to Lindy Pepper Bean, who from the very moment she wakes up in the morning, robotically gestures through the start of another day of online posturing, until the Doctor breaches her feed with dire warnings of ravenous flesh-eating invertebrates. Despite the Time Lord's guidance, these technology-addicted youths prove to be completely ill-equipped to cope with life outside of their social media bubble, as colossal, nightmarish slugs lay waste to their world. Survival requires these kids to break free of their technology addictions long enough to save themselves. And not only are most of them not up to the task, but some of them actually refuse to do so. Only Lindy narrowly escapes, but her survival is a bitter one, as she ends up betraying an ally who had gone out of their way to help her. Her ensuing real-world meeting with the Doctor and Ruby lays bare the harsh truth. These pampered brats were just simply not worth saving in the end. This is no happy ending this time. The Doctor is left in a state of shock and simply can do nothing but leave them to their fates, closing the TARDIS door as the end credits roll. Russell T Davies pulls no punches in condemning social media's corrosive impact on society. This is actually a story that he's had brewing away in the back of his mind for the last 10 years, something that him and Stephen Moffat were going to do together as part of the 11th Doctor's era, but has only just now sort of come to fruition, mainly because they've got the budget to realise the vision that they had for this. Fine Time's inhabitants are so pathetically enslaved by their AI puppet master that even basic motor functions elude them without digital instructions. Now, this might have been played for laughs, but we've all seen videos of people driving their cars into rivers, or yes, walking into lampposts, because they were all relying on their sat-navs. They were all looking at their phones rather than actually paying attention to where they were going. This is a chilling cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked technology. But you have to admit that once the Free Time residents revealed their true nature, you could argue that the AI had a point. The narrative also doesn't flinch from searing socio-political commentary. In a powerful exchange, the script overtly addresses on screen for the first time that, hey, the Doctor's not a white guy this time, underscoring just how blind hatred and sheer stupidity will doom Fine Time's residents. Offered refuge above the TARDIS, they arrogantly rebuff the Doctor's aid, sealing their likely doom in the hostile wilderness outside the city. Lindy even looks back and gives the Doctor a final, chilling, smug look as she vindictively sailed off to what is certain death, utterly convinced until the very end of her so-called moral superiority in rejecting the Doctor's offer of help purely because of the colour of his skin. And when you go back and watch the episode again, some of the things that she says to him, like accusing him of being responsible for the slugs or saying that he'll be disciplined, that just hits with a harder punch when you watch it the second time round, when you find out what she's actually meaning, what she's actually referring to. Gatwa put on an amazing performance here, with the Doctor's initially incredulous, then angry and frustrated reaction to their rejection. He pours everything into that one moment, and that moment will become one of the most defining scenes of his portrayal of the character. Despite how these people are, these awful, horrible people, he still wants to save them. He is literally begging these people to let him save them, because he's the Doctor, and the Doctor saves people. But this time, the people do not want to be saved by him, and you just know that these pampered posers, they're not going to last 5 minutes out there. They are not going to be able to cope with life outside of this bubble. And to be honest, I actually found myself rooting for the slugs on more than one occasion. Now, speaking of performances, Callie Cook is amazing in this. Even though Linda is a thoroughly, dreadfully awful character, you are actually completely invested in her until the very end. At one point, when she tells Ricky that that was her first hug, you do start to feel for her a bit, and maybe, just maybe, she'll come out of this scenario as a better person at the other end. It also echoes what Eric from the Space Babies episode said about being hugged for the first time as well. And if you remember, Donna Noble was a thoroughly unlikable person to begin with, only bothered about gossip magazines and which celebrity's done this and which celebrity's done that, until she met the Doctor, and it just opened up her eyes to this whole new amazing world. And then when the Doctor had to wipe her memory, she went back to being how she was before. Everything that she'd learned, all those experiences got wiped from her mind. You think, is the same thing going to happen to Lindy here? But no, absolutely not. It makes her betrayal of Ricky hit so much harder. It's like, you've come so far, you've experienced so much. How could you now just turn around and do that? And Ricky, oh bless him, Ricky, he was a great character. He was shown, even though he was one of the most sort of influential, influencers as part of this bubble, like being a singer and what have you, he was shown to have actually closed his bubble on a daily basis and educated himself with books, gone out and explored the town, actually been places. He's got an education, he has that knowledge, so that he hasn't become so narrow-minded. He's compassionate, he's got leadership skills, and this is what makes it so more tragic when he ends up copping it, all because of Lindy basically throwing him under the bus. Had Ricky survived, I feel that he would have also have made the decision to not go with the Doctor, but not because of the same reasons as the others. I felt that if he would have chosen to have gone with the Doctor, his influence would have made a lot of other people decide, yes, we'll follow Ricky, we'll go with the Doctor. Had Ricky survived and decided to not go with the Doctor, again, it would be for not of the same reasons of the others. I feel that he would have stayed for the sense of adventure, for the sense of exploring the great unknown, now free from the social norms that he had been previously bound to. And I also feel that he would have stayed because, quite frankly, the others needed him, especially Lindy, to survive out there. Again, Ricky showing that he's got genuine compassion, natural leadership skills, and everyone else would have stood a better chance of surviving had Lindy not thrown him under the bus like she did. He was so badly done to in this episode. Of course, there is another Susan Twist appearance, this time as Lindy's mum, and this time both the Doctor and Ruby recognise her from the characters that she was in previous episodes. So yes, this is definitely leading to something. But it does feel that the world building around Fine Time's oversight could have used some additional refinement in the script. I mean, who exactly runs this planet? Why were the Doctor and Ruby unable to land the TARDIS on Fine Time at first, but then could do so later on? How did they even come across this situation in the first place? There is also the issue where the Doctor is once again having extremely limited screen time. Yes folks, this is yet another Doctor Light episode, which is very puzzling because this is now 2 episodes in a row where we've had this, and also because we're this deep into Gatwa's tenure. I am loving what I'm seeing so far of this Doctor, but it feels like we haven't really learnt a lot about him so far, and we're already remarkably close to the season finale. Dawn Bubble is a brutal exploration of society's most toxic undercurrents, and although the AI overlords and their oversized slugs may have been the physical threat, it was actually humanity's worst impulses that proved to be the real monster of the week this time. Well, I'm back with another edition of Whovian Reviews, and what an absolutely visually beautiful episode to come back to. There's stunning costumes and sets, a glorious ballroom dance, a risky chat in a library with a lady fearing for her honour, and there's even a few declarations of, "You cad!" It can only mean one thing. We've got ourselves an episode of Doctor Who Does Bridgerton. So, let's take a look. Should not come as any surprise that Millie Gibson, who plays the part of the Doctor's current companion, Ruby Sunday, said that this was her favourite episode to film. The BBC even managed to acquire the services of the actual Bridgerton dance choreographer, Jack Murphy, to step on board and give the episode that undeniable feel of the Regency era. At the start of the episode, the Doctor and Ruby are living out their ballroom dreams at the beautiful home of the Duchess of Pemberton. But the good times do not last long. This is still the Whoniverse after all. Amid the refined dresses and dancing, they are darker forces lurking, and when a desiccated corpse and a peculiarly cavalier bounty hunter enter the fray, the veil of propriety quickly frays.
Oh, I love this. Classic.
You would have thought that the avian aliens would have disposed of the bodies a little better. I mean, how quickly does the Doctor find one of the dead bodies here? He literally trips upon it whilst going for a walk. And he probably would have noticed it sooner had he been outside earlier on. Are you telling me that no one's noticing the flashes of lightning, the sparks of electricity going off? There's a quickening going off around here. I was half expecting Connor MacLeod to emerge at one point. Meanwhile, the Doctor's companion Ruby Sunday feels sidelined for much of the thin plot in this story. This is surprising considering her strong showings in the likes of Boom and 73 Yards. In fact, when it first appears that she's been killed off screen, just doesn't feel likely considering her lack of screen time here. It was also odd that at this point we got a flashback to the Doctor promising Carla that he would keep Ruby safe. Now this echoes Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor promising the same to Jackie Tyler and then being absolutely distraught in the episode Bad Wolf when it looked like Rose had been killed on board the game station during a particularly deadly version of The Weakest Link hosted by a robotic version of Anne Robinson. Yes, the Anne droid. But then, isn't it odd that this scene with the Doctor and with Carla, why wasn't this also in Boom a few weeks back, considering that Ruby almost died in that episode as well? Still, for those moments when Ruby is on screen, her defiant wit shines through when dealing with the likes of Lord Barton.
Well, if you spoke to me and the girls like that on a Friday night down at the spinning wheel, then we'd rip you a new one, mate. Now, get out of my way, Lord Stilton.
Stilton?
It's a very difficult cheese.
If anything, in this episode, Ruby takes a backseat to accommodate newcomer Rogue, played by Jonathan Groff, obstinately being set up as a reoccurring romantic interest for the Doctor. Now, it's always a treat when the Doctor meets his match, and Rogue certainly lives up to that. Quick-witted and enigmatic, Rogue won't be a character that anyone will forget in a hurry. However, the decision to make the Doctor's sexuality being this forward represents a stark pivot for the show. Now, throughout the classic series, the Doctor has never once interacted with a companion in a romantic manner. This was deliberate as well. I mean, the producers made sure that the character of Susan Foreman, the Doctor's initial assistant, was established very, very clearly that she was the Doctor's granddaughter, just to ensure that no one thought that the pair's relationship was untoward. John Pertwee's third Doctor was very fond of the likes of Liz Shaw, Jo Grant and Sarah Jane Smith, but there was nothing sexual in their relationship. There was absolutely no hanky-panky going off in the TARDIS. Now yes, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward, who played the fourth version of the Doctor and the second version of Romana, respectively in the show, did fall in love and get married at one point whilst working on the show together, but all that romancing went on when the cameras stopped rolling. This did change in the TV movie when Paul McGann's 8th Doctor awkwardly kissed Grace Holloway, and yes, the 9th and 10th Doctors were romantically involved with Rose. 10 also had a bit of a whirlwind romance with the Madame du Pompadour, whilst 11 was Randy for River Song, and 13 had one brief date with Yaz before booting her out of the TARDIS. But the Doctor has never appeared to be in love or interested in a long-term commitment. So the Doctor's active sexuality is a new avenue of storytelling for this show. Still, seeing Rogue and the Doctor playing off against each other is a delight, and this is how you're supposed to write a same-sex love story. Chris Chibnall had 2 seasons and several specials to try and make us convinced that Yaz and 13 were in love with each other, and it just came out of nowhere and it felt forced. That's not the case here. Rogue and the Doctor have got that spark going on from the very beginning. Gatwa and Groff just have great chemistry together, so when Rogue's final words are "find me," I really hope that he does. I'd love to see this character again. Also, I was getting a lot of Captain Jack Harkness vibes from Rogue. Now this part could have even been Captain Jack Harkness had John Barrowman not gone and gotten himself cancelled. In fact, it's a shame that this wasn't a two-parter. Not only would this have allowed for Ruby Sunday to do more on screen, but it would have allowed more time for the Doctor and for us to have gotten to know Rogue a little bit better and to have more build leading up to that kiss. The kiss did feel a bit rushed. I mean, come on, it took an entire season before he kissed Rose Tyler. It also continues Russell T Davies's theme of having modern pop songs being part of the story in Doctor Who. Not only did we have Toxic by Britney Spears and Here Come the Drums by Rogue Traders during his first time as showrunner, but for his second run as showrunner, so far we've had Spice Up Your Life by the Spice Girls, Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini by Brian Hyland, and for this episode we've got a double whammy of Poker Face by Lady Gaga and Kylie Minogue's Can't Get You Out of My Head, which is a bit odd considering that Kylie has actually been in Doctor Who. By the way, the inside of Rogue's TARDIS, sorry, I mean spaceship, is beautiful, and I love that the Doctor then got to bring Rogue over to look at the TARDIS, and Rogue got his own "it's bigger on the inside" moment. It's a case of, go on then, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. Meanwhile, who is that Doctor between Doctors 1 and 4? Why, it's none other than Richard E. Grant, representing the Doctor from Scream of the Shalka. So I guess that means that the animated Doctor adventures are now canon. Grant has been in live action before as the Great Intelligence during the 11th Doctor's run, and he was one of several funny regenerations during the comic relief special The Curse of Fatal Death. Oh, and the headshot of the third Doctor, John Pertwee, that's actually from another comic relief special, the EastEnders crossover, Dimensions in Time. So does that mean that this is now officially canon? Oh boy. At this point though, what even is canon? It's science fiction. You can do whatever the hell you want. Of course, we mustn't forget that there is yet another Susan Twist appearance, this time as a painting, leading the Doctor and Ruby to determine that this isn't just a coincidence now. Something is definitely not quite right here. This is also the second time that the Susan Twist character has been a mother, and with the continuous themes of Ruby not knowing who her mother is, the continuing theme of children being left as orphans, is that going to be of some significance? Is that going to bode into what happens in the end?
Oh, this is so Bridgerton.
Whilst the Bridgerton homages ultimately veer into overindulgence to the point where it actually feels like an advertisement for the Netflix show at times, Rogue still manages to become a rollicking fun time and likely palate cleanser before that devastating two-part finale comes along. Speaking of which, we have tickets to go and see this two-part finale in the cinema at midnight. So I will not be watching these episodes on the BBC iPlayer. I will be watching them back to back on the big screen. And I will also be reviewing these episodes in one video together, like I did with the season openers, Space Babies and the Devil's Chord. So do look out for that when it comes to the channel. It's hard to believe that we've already reached the finale of the latest season of Doctor Who. It seems like only yesterday that we were looking at talking babies in space and some bootleg Beatles. But now's the time to bring this chapter to a close. A classic villain from the Doctor's past has returned in dramatic fashion, and he's currently inflicting death and destruction upon the entire universe, which just simply won't do. Will the Doctor and Ruby be able to defeat a literal god of death? And will we finally get some answers for all those long-standing questions? Well, let's take a look. So, in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, we finally discovered the identity of the mysterious woman who has been appearing with the Doctor and Ruby all throughout this season's adventures, and even before then. And it turns out that Susan Triad, played by Susan Twist, and her Theresa May-inspired dancing has been nothing more than a pawn all along. In fact, S-Triad was such an all-too-obvious anagram of TARDIS that it was dealt with in the first couple of minutes, with everybody standing around essentially saying to the viewer, well, yeah, obviously. classic companion Mel, played by Bonnie Langford, had far more to do here than she did when she returned for the 60th anniversary, and having her undercover in the Triad Technology Company was a clever way of illustrating how UNIT utilises the Doctor's former companions once their travels with the Time Lord have ended. Although the fact that Rose, played by a returning Yasmin Finney, and boy genius Maurice Gibbons, played by Lenny Rush, were working for UNIT, does raise some serious fundamental questions about child labour laws in the Whooniverse. Having an old VHS videocassette tape as the vital bit of tech to drive the plot forward was a lovely nod to the series' own wilderness years, even if the time window then being able to extrapolate a 3D hologram environment from the tape was basically, well, it's just like the holodeck from Star Trek, isn't it? Recent episodes of Doctor Who have seen the TARDIS behaving rather strangely and making odd groaning sounds. In The Devil's Chord, Ruby assumed that the noise was a result of the Doctor freeing his ship from the Maestro's control, but the Time Lord said that no, something else is responsible. Now, to be honest, I feel that the TARDIS making these noises was something that should have been happening a little more often throughout the series. I mean, we've kept having Susan Twist making a cameo appearance in virtually every episode. I felt that in addition to that, we should have had more TARDIS moaning going off in order to better build up to this dramatic reveal. And what exactly is this dramatic reveal? Well, it's discovered that the immortal god of death, Sutekh, has been secretly hiding on board the TARDIS ever since he was last defeated by Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor way back in 1975. And it looks like the 49 years or so that Sutekh has been a secret stowaway on board the Doctor's marvellous machine has given him quite the upgrade in terms of appearance. Now, is this Sutekh's true form, or the result of travelling through countless time streams? We don't know, because that's never explained, something that becomes all too regular in this two-part finale. Thankfully, Gabriel Wolfe has returned to the show, now at the age of 91, to provide his silky smooth yet menacingly evil voice once again for the God of Death. But who is Sutekh? Well, let me explain. In the 1975 serial Pyramids of Mars, the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith first encountered a race of godlike beings who were worshipped by many cultures across the universe, including on Earth, in ancient Egypt, and on Mars, which is where the final confrontation took place. The Doctor was able to extend the terminus of the time tunnel down which Sutekh was travelling into the far future, which resulted in the God of Death apparently meeting his own demise, appearing to age rapidly and eventually perish, with the Doctor suggesting that he may have lived for as long as 7,000 years before meeting his demise. Now, that was the idea, but no, he's apparently been hiding on board the TARDIS ever since. I presume that this was supposed to be an epic reveal, but it just felt a little awkward. Are you telling me, seriously, that all this time, neither the TARDIS nor the Doctor was able to detect that there was an alien god hitchhiking on all its adventures? And of course, all this is going to do is make Whovians go back over previous episodes now and question the likelihood of Sutekh being there. Are you telling me that he was here when Captain Jack was also holding onto the TARDIS? What about in the following episode from that when the TARDIS was getting dipped in hot lava? How did the Weeping Angels move if they were being watched by Sutekh? Just saying. And where was Sutekh when the Doctor and River Song were living together for several years? Where was Sutekh when Amy and Rory were going at it like a pair of rabbits on the TARDIS? Ew. It's certainly turned into a bit of a meme, where Whovians have been reimagining scenes from across Doctor Who history with Sutekh now added into them, and not in a way that paints the show in a good way, more in a way that makes the show look a little, well, ridiculous, if we're being honest. And further to that, with all the misdirection over whether or not Susan Triad would turn out to be the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan Foreman, it is easy to forget then that Mrs. Flood is upstairs with Cherry Sunday and being all menacingly weird. I mean, she couldn't be, could she? There's a storm coming in, says Flood, delivering one of her now trademark looks to the camera. He waits no more. Now, who exactly Mrs. Flood is, how she apparently has the ability to bend reality, and how she knows about the threat posed by Sutekh, still remains unclear. And then as we come into the second episode of this two-part finale, Empire of Death, Sutek and his minions are killing everyone around them with his sand of death, his dust of death, whatever you like. Kate Lethbridge-Stewart calls the Doctor to say goodbye right before she dies, but it's pretty hard to believe that that's really the last we've seen of her. One by one, all the other supporting characters from this season also meet their likely temporary, crumbly end. Blimey, it's getting a bit like Avengers Infinity War around here, isn't it? Also, Morris has guns in his Segway, because why the hell not? The Doctor, Ruby and Mel end up hiding and eventually escaping in a second TARDIS that has been built entirely from memories in Unit's time window. If you haven't already seen this composite TARDIS, which entirely consists of parts from other versions of the famous blue box, it's a classic fan's treat. The interior is literally crammed with souvenirs and references from the Time Lord's previous incarnations, and it's surprisingly moving to see Mel getting all choked up when she finds the infamous rainbow coat that belonged to Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor, or seeing her snuggle up to the question mark jumper that Sylvester McCoy's Seventh Doctor wore. I am going to have to go back to this scene at one point and pause it at several times to look at all the various Easter eggs and references in this. And there is even a clip from Pyramids of Mars which helped to provide more background about what happened to Sutek the last time he met the Doctor. And of course we have to grin at any sight of the wonderful, legendary pairing of the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith. Seriously though, do go back and watch this classic episode. They're all on the BBC iPlayer after all, so you've got no excuse, frankly. Anyway, the whole thing feels a little convoluted and rushed, but long story short, none of the Susans were the Doctor's granddaughter, and everywhere in time and space that the Doctor has travelled to, Sutek has created essentially another clone of Susan Triad, which is now spreading his dust of death. Basically, everywhere that the Doctor has visited across time and space since Pyramid of Mars is now either dead or dying. And this might have had more impact if they'd had a little more time to explain the story. However, the clock is ticking. With most of the universe now dying at Sutek's hand, the Doctor, Ruby and Mel are still managing to survive in the memory TARDIS, because Sutek is also puzzled by the story of Ruby's mother. This sets the stake even higher for that reveal, but oh boy, we'll come back to that in a bit. The Doctor eventually meets a mystery woman on a random planet who has something that he desperately needs, i.e. it's a spoon. He's saving the universe with a spoon again. She seems to be the last survivor, well, anywhere, quite frankly. However, she's lost all memory of her life, apart from whether or not she actually had a baby or not. Apart from what she gives the Doctor, i.e. the spoon, she doesn't have much to add to the story apart from showing the impact of Sutek's death wave, if you like. Opinions may vary about whether any of this scene was actually needed. The group eventually figures out a way to determine Ruby's mum's identity, but their plans get thrown off course due to Mel slowly becoming possessed by Sutek. But the Doctor and Ruby finally find a way to defeat the God of Death by, taking him out for walkies? Sutek, the all-powerful God of Death, defeated by a dog lead. Again, the whole thing feels rushed. And how exactly is dragging Sutek through the time stream going to lead to his demise when he's already spent nearly 50 years doing the same thing, being moved along the time stream? Again, there's no time to explain any of this. It's just, I bring death to death, and it's like, yeah, but how? Again, no time to explain any of this. All you need to know is that the universe is saved once again. Phew. As everyone comes back, we finally get an idea about Mrs. Flood's identity when she refers to the Doctor as a clever boy. However, it looks like we will have to wait longer for a definitive answer about this mystery woman. And also, despite the fact that it's only been about 2 minutes since the entire human race has been resurrected from Sutek's dust of death, Domino's have had their staff right back to the ovens, and Uber Eats were bringing pizza to Unit HQ. Also, everyone's drinking tea. I mean, how British is that? The world nearly ended, and the first response is to put the kettle on. Good old cup of tea, right? It solves everything. Now, we get to the moment that everyone has been waiting for, an answer to the question of Ruby's mum's identity. Now, I really like the character of Ruby. I think she's fantastic, she's got an infectious energy, and I wanted nothing more than the best for her, and I'm very happy that here we finally get to see her get those answers, and she finally gets that happy ending. However, for the audience, it feels like a cop-out. It doesn't really answer any questions about Ruby's hidden secret powers or why it kept snowing this season. We believe that Ruby was important because the writers literally told us she was important. We believe that Ruby's mother was also going to be important because the writers had told us that Ruby's mother will be important. So for them to then say, nah, she was only important because you thought she was important, was pretty cheap and condescending. And Ruby's vague superhuman snow and music powers literally makes no sense now, especially if you go back and watch over this season again. Also, Ruby's mum, when she abandoned Ruby, she was a 15-year-old girl who had very recently just had a baby. She would have been absolutely heartbroken and terrified at the time she left her child at the church. I don't really think she's going to be dressing up in a black hooded cloak, acting woo, all spooky and mysterious, and then spending some time to look for security cameras so she could walk away, stand, and dramatically point at a signpost to name Ruby. Why was she even pointing at a signpost anyway? There's nobody there to see her or to know that that was her intention. Also, let's go all the way back to last year's Christmas special, shall we? Which I still need to review on this channel, by the way. This is when we first met Ruby. Now, there's no way that Davina McCall, yes, she was in that episode, wouldn't have been able to find a normal human lady with normal human DNA. Are you seriously telling me that Ruby's mum never got blood drawn, never had a blood transfusion, never needed to see a doctor, or that no other cameras saw her in the last 20 years? Come on. Yeah, it's a bit of a cop-out, is this. It actually feels a little insulting. So, Ruby and the doctor say goodbye. For now. Online spoilers have already revealed that Millie Gibson will be back next season, so we know this isn't really the last we've seen of her. However, the Doctor and Ruby's relationship was so strong right out of the gate this year. They felt like best friends with remarkable speed, and you can feel the sadness when they have to part ways. Ncuti Gatwa does an amazing job of making the Time Lord's ever-present loneliness feel overwhelming during this exchange. You can feel both of the Doctor's hearts breaking as he says goodbye to yet another companion. But this time it's one that's made him rethink his views about family. And speaking of family, you hope that now he's finally going to start looking for his granddaughter. They really need to bring back Carol Ann Ford as Susan Foreman, even if it's just to confirm that yes, she can regenerate and then we have a regeneration scene. Come on, get it done. Everything seems to end well for Ruby, but Mrs. Flood returns one last time to issue an ominous warning to the Doctor. What does it mean? Well, I guess we'll have to wait until the next Christmas special to find out what's going to happen next. Is she the Rani? Is she Clara? Is she Susan? Is she another one of these all-powerful gods? Possible coincidence, the Doctor says that Time Lords regenerate to save themselves or to hide themselves away, and Mrs. Flood specifically says in this episode she's always hiding herself away. Nothing? Maybe? Well, see you at Christmas, I guess. In the meantime, if you have enjoyed this particular video and you found my inane rambling to be fairly amusing and entertaining, then please do take the time to leave a like and a comment. Please also consider sharing this video across your social media, in particular with anything that's related to Doctor Who and classic sci-fi in general. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and do activate the notification bell to stay updated on new uploads. I will have the further parts of our Avengers review series popping up on the channel very soon. But yes, for now, thank you very much for stopping by the Big Daddy D Reviews channel, and we'll catch you again next time.